What's up everyone, it's your boy back again with another phone to pull out of box. Sorry, I've got no idea what happened there. I think I've been watching too much YouTube. This little bleeder right here is the Poco F4 GT. It's a dedicated gaming smartphone to take on the Red Magics and the Black Sharks of the world. It's essentially a rebranded Redmi K50 gaming edition, which in turn ain't too far off the likes of the Black Shark 4S Pro. It's absolutely loaded with premium specs and features, including the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. You've got some very clever liquid cooling tech in there, an HDR10 Plus AMOLED display, and special gaming features like pop-up triggers, extra mics, all kinds of shenanigans. So hopefully that little teaser has got the old juices flowing. Let's whip the Poco F4 GT on out of the box, take you on a full-on tour. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So first big question, what do you got in the box? Well, there's one Poco F4 GT, be a bit miffed if there wasn't. You've got an absolute brick of an adapter, 120 watts. Not even kidding, you could use this thing to hammer in nails. You've got a commendably sizable Type-C USB cable, and it's got a clever side pokey end bit. That's the technical term, obviously, so you can charge the phone and still use it to game. You've also got a Type-C to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter, so no jack on the Poco F4, sadly. But in better news, you do get a condom case bundled in there, so you can keep your shiny new gaming smartphone safe from harm. And that's it. Nice and simple, so enough piddling about, let's get on with the actual smartphone. And there she blows, the Poco F4 GT in all of its glory, and like a lot of gaming smartphones, it does sport an aluminium frame which stretches around the edges and all the way across the back as well, finishing in this lovely finish which is definitely very reminiscent of those Black Shark smartphones. This right here is the Stealth Black model. Not sure right now at the time I shot this video if it's going to be available in different colors as well. And that frame, because it's made from metal, does weigh over 200 grams. It's got some serious heft to it, but that's pretty standard for gaming handsets. It's a 6.67-inch device, so definitely quite the handful, but reasonably comfortable to clutch as well. It's a Gorilla Glass Victus display up front, so even if you drop the Poco F4 GT, hopefully it won't shatter on impact. And while I've personally found that Victus does tend to scratch up rather easily, certainly compared with earlier versions of Gorilla Glass, you do at least have a pre-installed screen protector on here to help keep it safe from harm. Quick tour of the edges of the phone. You've got your Type-C USB port down below and also a speaker grill. Over on this edge, you've got your volume rocker and also a secondary mic. More on that in a bit. You've also got your SIM tray. Then on the top edge, you've once again got another speaker grill and what looks like an IR blaster. And then on the final edge, you've got your power button with an integrated fingerprint sensor, and you've also got the pop-out shoulder buttons. Here on the aluminium arse end, it's got a matte finish, so it doesn't seem to pick up smears and grime too easily, which is always good. And the overall design, fairly subdued for a gaming smartphone, certainly compared with the ROGs and everything of the world. Thankfully, the camera chassis doesn't jut too far from the surface. You've got a nifty lightning bolt design for the camera flash there. And for some reason, Poco has put a couple of random words here on the camera grille, freezing and speediest. I'm guessing speediest refers to the 120 watt fast charge and freezing to the cooling technology. Not really sure why they felt the need to just chuck those two random words on there though. Okay, so that's enough on the design. Let's move on to the actual software side of things. What you got here is Android 12, the latest, freshest version, thankfully, with a bit of MiUI 13 chucked on top. I've already done a full video on MiUI 13, so I won't go into full details about it, but you've got some little additions like the control center, which do actually add to the overall Android experience. And Xiaomi also adds extra customization as well, so for instance, you've got a full-on always-on display here. By default, this is set to just turn on for 10 seconds after you tap the screen, which of course isn't an always-on display, but you can actually turn it on always or schedule it between certain times. You've got lots of different designs to choose from as well, including more trippy efforts, your standard sort of digital and analog stuff, bullshit optimistic mantras, and plenty of other helpful bonus bits as well, including, thank God, a one-handed mode, which certainly comes in handy at times. And because the Poco F4 GT is a gaming smartphone, you do have some additional bonus special features which are dedicated gaming efforts. This includes the seemingly obligatory LED lighting. You can have this flash on when you're gaming, also when you're receiving a call or when a notification pops through, so you can basically use it as a glorified notifications light. And as you can see there, you can choose what color it flashes. And you can choose which apps actually use the LED as a notification light as well, although you can't specify individual colors for each app. In the special features section where you'll find the LED light options, you'll also find the pop-up trigger customization as well, but more on that when we actually dive into the gaming. Drawbacks with MiUI include the fact that OS and security updates aren't always the most timely. I'm not sure how many guaranteed updates the F4 GT will have, as I'm shooting this ahead of the official UK launch, but I'll keep you updated on that. And of course, as usual, you get a good bit of crapware bunged on here to begin with. Lots of stuff I certainly did not ask to be installed on here, like TikTok, Spotify, Amazon Shopping, Agoda. Thankfully no Booking.com this time though. You got that fingerprint sensor built into that edge-mounted power button as well, and so far touchwood seems very responsive, very swift to work. Pretty accurate despite the fact it is super skinny. And you also have a bit of face unlock support here on the Poco F4 GT as well. And because it's Android 12, of course, as you can see there, you get notified whenever something actually makes use of your camera or your mic. You can shut that shiz down immediately if you don't want any of that. And don't worry if you like to install lots of massive whopping great games like Genshin Impact, because you've got 256 gigs of built-in storage here on the F4 GT, plenty of space. Probably just as well because there is bugger all room in that SIM tray for a micro SD memory card, just 2 SIM cards. Now the display here on the Poco F4 GT is a 6.67 inch AMOLED banger. Full HD plus resolution, nice and crisp despite the fact it is a spacious display. And like all AMOLED panels out there, gorgeous poppy colors. You can dial it down in the display settings if you prefer, but I really like it on the default visuals. You got all the usual benefits of an OLED panel, including wide viewing angles, a nice sharp contrast as well. You got full HDR10 Plus streaming support here. And certainly pretty bright on the max levels as well. I found that I could happily do a bit of gaming outdoors if needed, although it is a better experience indoors. You're not squinting quite so much. However, unlike a lot of other gaming smartphones, the F4 GT does sport a selfie camera orifice up there towards the top end. Does intrude slightly on the experience when you're gaming or when you go on full view when streaming a bit of Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. Not to a massive degree, thankfully. Personally, I never found it caused me any issues, but some people I can understand might be slightly perturbed by it. And as well as playing around with the color output and everything here in the display settings, you can also change up the refresh rate as well. The Poco F4 GT maxes out at 120 Hz, and you can have it adjust automatically if you want. Otherwise, you can just bump it up from 60 Hz to 120 Hz full time. Those are your only 2 options, though. It doesn't drop any lower, and there's no 90 Hz option. Well, what about the audio? Well, there's no headphone jack here on the Poco F4 GT, but thankfully when you're gaming, you don't even need to bother with headphones because the quad speaker output here is pretty bloody good. The speaker grills are mounted on the top and bottom edges of the smartphone, and let's just bump up the volume and see exactly how good it is. So if you've been checking out Xiaomi's new super value Redmi Note 11 smartphones, you might be a wee bit confused. Should I get the regular model or should I upgrade to that Redmi Note 11 Pro? So on that maxed out volume, the audio goes ever so slightly tinny, but it's really not bad at all for a budget-friendly gaming smartphone, and it'll certainly cut through any kind of background noise, so even if you're playing in a rather raucous family environment, shall we say, you'll have no issues hearing what's going on. Reasonably directional sound as well, not quite as strong as some rivals like the ROG phones, which cost a considerable amount more, of course. And as you'd expect, you've got full Dolby Atmos support, of course, and you can play around with the various presets depending on what you're up to. Otherwise, leave it on dynamic and it will adjust depending on what app you're playing around with. You've also got a graphic equalizer. Again, lots of presets to choose between, otherwise you can manually have a bit of a fiddle. And you've also got full Bluetooth 5.2 support on here as well. I tried streaming some audio to a couple of speakers and a couple of pairs of headphones, and no issues whatsoever, all good. Now, of course, performance pretty important when it comes to gaming smartphones, and no issues here on the Poco F4 GT in that department, that's for sure. You got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 backed by 12 gigs of RAM, and as you can see there, pretty dependable, solid benchmarking scores. But of course, what better way to test out a gaming smartphone than by doing a bit of gaming? And of course, the ultimate test is always Genshin Impact, one of the most memory guzzling, phone melting Android titles out there. Now, when you're gaming, you can pull out the Game Turbo menu at any point simply by swiping from the left or the right edges up near that top corner. And this presents the usual selection of excellent gaming features that you'll find on other Xiaomi and Poco smartphones as well, basically anything running MiUI. One of the first things I did was put it into full-on performance mode, which is slightly awkward. You just got to tap that little bit up top. And this basically maxes out all of the settings to make sure you get the best possible performance out of your phone. But there is a little warning there that it could also drain the battery faster and heat the bugger up. Did it actually do that while running Genshin Impact? Well, more on that in a bit. Tease, tease, tease. You've got some other great tools on here, including Do Not Disturb, which will just basically not disturb you while you're gaming, obviously. You can take a screenshot, you can quickly change up the brightness if you want to, boost that all the way up. And then of course there's one of my own personal Game Turbo favourites, the voice changer.
This can make me sound like a manly man. I will punch you in the face and make you cry.
And it's from within the Game Turbo menu that you can set up those handy shoulder buttons as well. So the shoulder buttons can be popped out of the phone's chassis simply by pushing these two little switches towards the center of the smartphone. And then to set up what they actually do, all you got to do is drag these little icons to one of the on-screen buttons. So for instance, here in Genshin Impact, I'm going to have the left trigger mapped to the special attack, the right trigger mapped to the standard attack. And those shoulder buttons are frankly fantastic, especially in fast-paced games like Call of Duty Mobile, where you need to aim and shoot someone within a matter of milliseconds, otherwise you will get a bullet right to the mug. And these are proper, full-on pushable shoulder buttons as well. They're definitely a step up from the touch-sensitive haptic feedback efforts you get on some other gaming smartphones. I found there was absolutely zero latency whatsoever, so it did actually give me a bit of an advantage in games like COD Mobile, which frankly I need because I'm a bit cack at it. And the Poco F4 GT also sports a secondary mic hole down here on the edge of the smartphone right there, so that's great of course if you're going to be chatting with teammates or screaming abuse at your enemies or whatever else, because when you are clutching the phone like this, of course the standard mic may get muffled. So I got my Genshin on for a considerable amount of time, and thankfully the performance stayed strong. I very rarely saw any kind of dip at all in that frame rate, to be perfectly honest, even on the highest detail settings with the 60 FPS mode activated. The gameplay just stayed beautifully fluid and no issues with the screen responsiveness either. 480Hz touch response here on the F4. So every frantic, sweaty poke and swipe instantly registered by the game. And packed inside of that metal frame, as well as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and a shag load of RAM, you've also got the clever Liquid Cool Tech 3.0 as well, and this definitely does its job here on the F4 GT. Even after gaming on Genshin Impact for an hour plus, I found the back end did get a little bit toasty, but the actual performance itself, there was zero throttling whatsoever. I didn't notice any dips at all. So if you are looking for a gaming smartphone to keep you entertained for a full afternoon or whatever, then basically job done. However, if you're going to be playing the likes of Genshin for a good long afternoon or whatever, you're going to want to make sure the Poco F4 GT is fully charged before you get going. It's got a 4,700 milliamp capacity battery stuffed inside of there. Not massive as far as gaming smartphones go, and of course the likes of Genshin do drain it pretty quick. And while you do have that nifty charger which allows you to charge up the smartphone and game at the same time, I wouldn't recommend doing so while playing the likes of Genshin, because that's when the phone does get proper toasty indeed. I would say maybe reserve that for likes of PubG or Call of Duty or something like that, which isn't quite so much of a strain. Good news is though, if you do need to top it up, it charges up really ruddy quick because you've got 120 watt wide charging support, just like the Xiaomi Redmi Note 11 Pro Plus. So basically, plug it in, go for a whiz, go make yourself a sandwich or whatever, and by the time you get back, it'll be ready for action again. However, note that there is no wireless charging support here on the Poco F4 GT, so if that's a bit of a deal breaker for you, then bam. So let's finish, as always, with a squint at that camera tech. So what you have here is a 64 megapixel primary shooter with optical image stabilization built in and a nice and nippy autofocus. You've got all the usual MiUI camera app features, including a bit of AI mode action, which I tend to leave off because it tends to produce more vivid, more natural colors. It seems to think that Veronica is a cat as well for some reason, or maybe a dog, some sort of household pet. And here's a sample of some photos I took in the past 24 hours around the homestead. Seems like a very capable camera, can capture some nice crisp detail and natural looking colors in a variety of conditions. Does pretty good in sort of more ambient light too. You also have a simple 8 megapixel ultra wide angle sensor that you can swap to at any time. Don't expect the same natural looking colors, but it's always handy if you want a more pulled back view of the action. And of course you get the usual wide selection of bonus modes as well, including a portrait mode. If you hit more, you can actually shoot in that full on 64 megapixel resolution. You also have a dedicated pro mode where again you can shoot at 64 meg. You can also shoot in RAW file format. And then if we swap to the video mode, you can capture footage at full HD or 4K resolution at 30 or 60 frames per second. And again, here's some simple sample footage that I shot around the place. And again, those visuals nice and crisp at 4K resolution. The image stabilization is all right. The audio pickup is nice and clear too. Can leave. And the final lens here on the back end of the Poco F4 GT is your bog standard basic macro sensor. Good for your extreme close-ups. And then around front, we have a 20 megapixel selfie shooter, which again seems pretty good for your everyday Instagrammable snaps. You've got good face tracking on there to keep you in focus. Who's that handsome wee f***er right there, eh? This doesn't seem too perturbed by strong lighting, seems to work well indoors as well, still picks up fine details. Just remember to turn off that beautify bollocks, which is turned on by default. And if it's video you'd be wanting, sorry, I don't know why I've turned into a pirate all of a sudden, you can shoot up to full HD resolution video with that front-facing camera, either at 30 or 60 frames per second, again, with very respectable audio pickup. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a nutshell is the fresh new Poco F4 GT gaming smartphone. A hell of a gamer on a sort of a budget. You've got some proper solid performance packed in there, helped along by the excellent coolant tech, some great gaming features including the dedicated shoulder triggers. And Poco certainly doesn't seem to have skimped in the other areas either. But what do you think? Are you tempted by the Poco F4 GT? I'll hopefully have full UK pricing and release information down in the video description, because I don't know that at the time I'm shooting this video, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely be great to hear your thoughts. Please do poke, subscribe, ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. And have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers, everyone. Love you.